What's up, college sports fans? I'm Stucky.
I'm Colin Wilson.
I'm Mike Calabrese.
I'm Maria Marino.
I'm Charlie DiSturco, and we're excited that the Big Bets on Campus brand is launching its very own YouTube channel.
You'll be able to find every episode of the BBOC podcast, live shows, and other college sports content on this new channel.
Not only will the channel be dedicated to betting on college sports, but you'll also be able to find exclusive interviews with former college athletes,
College football power rankings,
and updates on other topics like the brand new College Football 25 video game series and the ins and outs of the recruiting trail all the way down to the transfer portal.
whether you're into college football,
College basketball,
College baseball, or any of the college sports.
We are the home for college sports, and BBOC is the channel for you.
make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the action. I'll see you there.
Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by BetMGM. This is the Group of Five Deep Dive. I'm Mike Calabrese, joined by Mike Iannello and Stucky. We are breaking down the final G5 conference of preview season, the MAC. The Mid-American is here, last but not least, a conference that, for the first time, is divisionless. So we're going to get into how that impacts who we're picking here to be in the title game. But when it comes to continuity the rest of the way, it's been the same team since 2016 once they kicked out UMass. So we like that level of continuity. Also, 11 of the 12 head coaches back. There's tons of roster turnover as we've gone through all of these G5 previews. So many teams get decimated. So when there is a decent amount of top 25 production returning, we like to highlight that. The MAC, though, has been basically the same in terms of their postseason play for years, 14 and 15 in the past 5 years in bowl season, but that's not why we love them. We love them because of those Tuesdays and Wednesday nights, the MACtion, the wild play within, this conference, the rivalries that have built up over the years. So before we get into it, I'm going to put this to you first, Iannello. The fact is, we've lost a little bit of the coaching luster. This used to be a springboard to bigger jobs in the power conferences. You had Brian Kelly going from Central. You had PJ Fleck going to the Cotton Bowl. It's at least at the time, it seemed like it was an elevator that was only going up for his career. He's stalled out a bit in Minnesota. Lance Leipold going to Kansas, having great success there, at least by Kansas standards. Are you surprised a little bit that the coaching carousel has slowed down in the MAC, or you just appreciate the fact that we have continuity at the top of these programs?
I'm not surprised because I feel like in general, the MAC has kind of slid further and further down the ladder in we're in the G5 rankings. You think back to some of those old MAC teams, whether it was, Marshall and the Ben Roethlisberger, Miami, Ohio. I feel like the talent level in the MAC is kind of just taking a dive and in all these conference previews, we've never once mentioned the MAC school for the college football playoff. I don't think anyone thinks there's a shot of that. I'm curious, Stucky, if you put the MAC and the Conference USA top to bottom in a battle royal, who's coming out on top this year? Where's the who's got the better conference this year?
Depends on what day of the week you play. Yeah, the MAC's definitely, it's just falling behind. It's going to continue to fall behind. You look at a team like Ohio, I think perfectly illustrates that with the talent that they've lost. They were, a couple years ago, this team was on top of the MAC. Granted, they haven't won a conference title since I think 1970 or something like that. But they were right there. They've had over 20 players that have now moved on to either the NFL or mostly Power 4 teams. Look no further than Curtis Rourke, their quarterback who went to Indiana. So, and then you look at who they brought in and some of these other MAC teams who they brought in. Like anyone who shines in the MAC is, you're bringing in, they're gone, right? They're gone in the portal. And if they don't go to the NFL. And then, unlike if we talked about the Sun Belt and some of the other better Group of 5 conferences, you're able to get some of the guys, some of the blue chippers who didn't work out at power programs that, or just want more playing time or just didn't work out. So you're getting some of the cast-offs from Power 5 and you're able to kind of maintain somewhat of your talent level, but the MAC's just falling behind. You got to reach into more JUCO, D2, FCS, So, yeah, you're going to start to see the MAC fall more and more behind just overall from a power rating perspective with their conference. And it already has been like over the last, 3 to 4 years. You still have had a couple top teams that have been there, but that's going to continue to happen. However, that won't change as long as the MAC stays the MAC, right? We still have these 12 teams. We still have weekday football. If the entire conference falls behind, it's still going to be as fun. And in some cases, like you could have more chaos. Right now, the bottom of the conference, like even like the bottom 6 or 7, it's bad right now. But the MAC's always going to be the MAC to me. I'm always going to love it. And for what it's worth, people are saying there's no divisions. There is still a luck element to the schedules, and because there's 4 pods. So the way that it works is you play everyone in your pod each year, and then it's in order to maintain some of the rivalries in the MAC, and then you'll play the rest of the teams, some of them each year. So the pods are Akron, Buffalo, and Kent State. Got to keep the wagon wheel. Ball State, Miami, and Ohio. Bowling Green, Northern Illinois, and Toledo. And then the directional Michigan schools in Western, Central, and Eastern. So keep that in mind going forward. That'll obviously, with no divisions, have a major impact on who gets to the MAC championship. But I agree with INL. Conference as a whole definitely falling behind, but doesn't make it any less fun. MACtion will always be a special part of my heart.
So over the years, I've hosted many podcasts, a lot in the tech space, and I was lucky enough to host one. It was called Sideline Data. It was a partnership with the Hospital for Special Surgery in New York City, and I got to interview like the leading ACL reconstructive surgeon in the whole country, and he was talking ins and outs of the Adrian Peterson reconstructive surgery, Dr. Riley Williams. In the same light, if you're looking for expertise, there is no one, and I've scoured the internet, I've talked to lots of people, I've made lots of bets on the MAC, that knows more about the MAC than Stuckey. So there's 2 things that you need to know. First, the MAC manifesto comes out in the preseason, which he writes every single year. That's the Bible. And then it gets updated. When do you usually drop that during the season, Stuck?
Mid-season, right before the conference play starts. So yeah, I'm not going to go into, I could talk about all these teams for forever. We don't want to be here for 5 hours. Plus, I do want to mention, because we're recording this, we record these ahead of time, and if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't. Welcome to the new channel. And if you are listening, a lot of our content comes out 24, 48, 72 hours earlier on YouTube for what it's worth. And we're going to have a bunch of live stuff there, so make sure you go there and subscribe. But with the MAC specifically, I won't lock in any futures until as closer to the regular season as I can get. And I think, and it's even more pertinent now we just talked about how the talent and they're falling behind overall. What's always been a problem in the MAC is depth and just building a deep roster. One of the reasons why these teams are hilariously awful on special teams outside of Miami, Ohio last year, and then Eastern Michigan perennially always, Chris Creighton has always a good special team squad. But a lot of these teams, if you just go look at like special teams power rate, like special teams adjusted efficiency, they're, you'll see them all. They're 126, 128, 130. So the reason for that is a lack of depth. So one of the things before I lock in any futures is the, fall camps injuries are massive. So especially, at quarterback, you lose a quarterback in camp, but you have cluster injury on the offensive line. Some of those things can matter even more for the MAC. So make sure that basically we'll go into all these teams here, and then in a couple weeks from now, the MAC manifesto, which will mention any, fall camp injuries and any updated information on some quarterback battles. So MAC manifesto. And then another update will come out, which again touches on depth, injuries. And one of the things worth mentioning with these MAC teams is some of them are going to play just horrendous non-cons. And then they're just going to go get the shit beat out of them. And then there's a good chance of injuries in those games. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. Western Michigan, a team I'm high on, has some hopes for this year. They start at Wisconsin, at Ohio State. Like, you want to work on some things, but I think the most important thing, if I'm Lance Taylor, I want to come out of that game just healthy. work on some things, get some looks, get some live reps against teams that are better than me, but you don't want to get too banged up there. So those are some of the things worth mentioning. But yeah, Mac's always been my first love.
Let's start with the defending MAC champs, the Miami, Ohio Redhawks, 11-3 last year, 7-1 in conference play. They lose to App State in the Cure Bowl after winning it over Toledo in the MAC title game. Their win total set at 7.5, plus 230 to win the conference, 25-1 to make the college football playoff. As I mentioned, they break through last year. They win their 4th MAC title in the past 20 years. The defense was just fantastic. Held teams below 16 points per game. That was good for 8th nationally. Special teams were special. Graham Nicholson won the Groza Award and made big kicks when they needed. Graham Nicholson, 6 back on defense. Brett Gabbert back for his 6th year of eligibility. This is really the last year of those like super senior, COVID year specials. He also has been a quarterback that when he's on the field, he's, pretty high end by MAC standards. He's very reliable, but he gets hurt. So we'll see what they have behind him in terms of the depth chart if that happens again. When he plays, the offense is good, but I don't know. Like, my question here is the offensive line is a veteran unit. They got 4 back, but Rashad Amos goes off to Ole Miss. They got new full-time runners in Tracy, who's a big back, and Jordan Brunson, who's even bigger at 226 pounds. The other big issue in terms of the coaching staff is their OC Jacob Bernowski is off to Pitt, as well as big play receiver Gage Larvadain off to South Carolina. So we'll see if they take a big step back, a half step back, if they get 12 games instead of 8 out of Gabbert, if it's a wash. I have some questions there. You mentioned schedules. Their schedule's tricky in that it's front-loaded. They're at Northwestern, home against Cincy, at Notre Dame, at Toledo, all by October 5th. But after that, this is one of those teams where I hope they lose those games and people write them off as long as they're healthy, because then they have Ohio, Central Michigan at home, at Ball State, Kent State, and Northern Illinois at home, and at Bowling Green. Could be a hot finish for the Red Hawks. I'll bring Ianello in here first. What are your thoughts on Gabbert staying upright for all 12 games? And if he does, are there enough playmakers around him for this offense to, fill in the holes of what naturally is going to be at least a slight half step back on defense?
Yeah, you mentioned the start of the schedule too with Northwestern, Cincy, Notre Dame out the gate. So, not that I think they have much of a chance to win those games anyway, but Gabbert better be ready to go because there's no easing with an FCS school. And yeah, listening to this podcast, if you rode Miami, Ohio, which me and Stucky both gave out on last year's show, you cashed a nice $850 ticket. So hopefully you guys listen to that. You mentioned the key pieces they lost: Amos, Larvadain, Caden Woolard on the defense. I mean, no loss bigger than gambling Heisman finalist Graham Nicholson. But yeah, they do bring back 7 stars on both sides of the ball. Kenny Tracy, Keon Mosey at running back. They bring in Purdue transfer Dylan Downey. So I think the running game should be fine. Caden McDonald and Javon Tracy are back at receiver. They bring 4 starters back on the O-line. So I think they should be good there. Front seven obviously loses Willard, I said, but Kobe Hilton's back. Brian Ugu's back. Ty Weiss is back. Matt Salopik is probably the best linebacker in the conference. Led the MAC in tackles last year, so getting him back again is big. Secondary has some holes that need to be addressed, but that's really the only weakness this team has, other than Gabbert's health. You mentioned we talked about the non-con. Toledo and Bowling Green are both on the road, so I still think this is the best team in the conference, but it's so hard to repeat in the MAC. We haven't had a repeat MAC champion since 2012, 2011, Northern Illinois. So I feel like I'm just kind of blindly, we did it last year with Toledo. I'm just blindly not betting the MAC champ to repeat. Like I said, we got them at plus 850 last year, and now you're getting them plus 230. So to me, I like them still, but there's just no value in that number. So it's a pass for me.
Stuck to bring you in here just real quick. Bill Conley from ESPN likes to point out that Martin, as a head coach, is one of the most conservative, risk-averse coaches. And we know this. We know he wants to play field position. We know he wants to win with defense. And when his special teams are really good, that's an added bonus. Do you have any concerns about them trying to pull out as many close games if the defense isn't quite as good this year?
Well, yeah, if you thought he was conservative before, after last year, oh baby, he's now all justified. I mean, they tried to after Gabbert went down, they were basically just trying to win with field goals and punting.
They did.
Yeah, and they did, and then he won the MAC title with a backup quarterback. I mean, they tried to win a bowl game playing without a quarterback. He was like, he was like, let's go. We can win any way possible. And they almost did. One of the funniest bowl games I've ever watched, by the way. Shout out to Miami Bahad, the Spread Hawks who covered that game. I don't know if they threw for. I don't remember them doing anything well on offense. It was just I think there was 13 or like 11 fumbles in that game. Hilarious. One of my favorite bowls ever.
Same.
Yeah. So you will rarely ever see me buy the favorite in the MAC. Not doing it this year. So I also don't think you can bet the win total because they don't know. If you're going to bet it, I would say wouldn't bet the over. I mean, I project 7.55, but it's tough to project because Northwestern and Cincy are winnable games, but not if Gabbard doesn't play and not if Gabbard isn't healthy. And Martin came out and said he hopes, doesn't know. So, a couple things we do know is Gabbard has never stayed healthy. He's always had injuries. That's another reason. Like last year, I remember specifically saying on this podcast, I said, look, I'm concerned about Gabbard being healthy. Which ended up coming true. He ended up getting hurt. But I'm willing to invest at plus 850 to take a shot on this team that he does stay healthy. Now, luckily, it worked out without him staying healthy. But now that you're the favorite, you got to worry about his injuries. And then from a win total perspective, there's a couple things. He might not be fully healthy. He might not be completely 100% ready to go. And then even if he's like very close, Miami Ohio might just say like, hey, let's really be cautious in the first couple weeks, right? And then my win total then would fluctuate pretty drastically because Avion Smith's not there. The depth at quarterback is not great. So that's something to keep in mind. It's not like they're like, I know, so they're not playing like, Little Sisters of the Poor week one. They're playing at Northwestern. I think the line last time I saw they were like +4, +4.5, which would obviously move drastically if Gabbard is out. So that's something to keep in mind. The schedule also much more difficult. They replace compared to last year. They replaced Delaware State at home with a game at Northwestern. In conference, they replace Akron, Buffalo, and Western Michigan, who had 9 wins combined last year, with Eastern Michigan, Northern Illinois, and Central Michigan. Not a huge jump up, but it's from 9 to 18 wins, and you're dropping off Akron, Buffalo, 2 of the worst in the league. And so when I look at this team, I just can't buy them at their price point. You have to also remember there's a couple things that do concern me outside of Gabbard just staying healthy. Tackles are great on the offensive line. That's probably the strength of the offense. And I am curious to see if like a guy like Downing, if he can come in and flash just coming down a level. But the special teams last year were so good. I said all year I have the number one rated special teams unit. You had Nicholson, who won the Lou Groza, went to Alabama. They won 2 games on blocked field goals. I mean, they're luckily they have a good punter back. But can their special teams be that dominant again? That's when after losing Nicholson and their special teams coach too. And then you hinted at this a bit, I know, as their defensive backfield is they play pretty vanilla defense, 4-2-5, not too many bells and whistles. And last year, why that defense was so good and so dominant is everyone on the back end always knew where to be. They never missed assignments. They were such good tacklers. They were so well schooled. And now you're going to be much more inexperienced. Like, look at a position like CB2. So I am worried that the secondary is just not going to be as well schooled, and that defense is going to take a step back. So overall, I would only recommend the under. But I project right around 7.55, total 7.5 juice to the over. But I would only say, so I do lean a tiny bit to the under, but I would only recommend the under just because the Gabbard uncertainty early, Gabbard's injury history, can the special teams be as good again? And then I think that the secondary, it's really got to come together because that's such a key for how that entire defense worked. And last year it was like an orchestra and it all came together. But the way that I'm approaching Miami Ohio is I just think that, hey, not considering them for a future, let's look at the rest of the board to see where we can find some value in the MAC.
I think too, if you're betting, you mentioned Northwestern and Cincinnati being winnable. I think when you're looking for these G5 teams to upset the Power 5, you're kind of hoping they kind of take them for granted and they don't, they're not up for the game. Miami, Ohio went into Cincinnati last year and beat them. So in overtime. So you
On a
don't think
block field goal. They won.
yeah, you don't think they're playing that game tape on the whole bus ride over to Oxford. So I have a feeling Cincinnati will be a little bit more prepared for this one, which I don't love. So I'm with you, Stuck.
All right, if there is some wiggle room for a team outside of the favorite to win this conference, we're going to get to a lot of good options here. Let's start with Bowling Green. 7-6 last year, 5-3 in conference. They lose to Minnesota in the Quick Lane Bowl. Their win total set at 6.5, 13-2 to win the MAC, 110-1 to make the college football playoff. They have two of the best players in the conference for starters. They got Harold Fannin Jr., who's a future NFL tight end, and they got CJ Brown, who is a fantastic safety with pro potential. They get four starters back on the line protecting Connor Bazelak. Terrion Stewart finished with the highest Pro Football Focus offensive grade of any running back in the country. I had to triple check that. That was correct. Above Ashton Genty, above a lot of Power 4 guys, he was the top one. Both Bazelak and Stewart played banged up at times last year. Stewart is back healthy after missing the last 4 games. The mission is simple early on. Keep them healthy through the Penn State and A&M games, because they're not going to win those games, but you don't want to lose any, critical contributors. Defensively, they were a great unit by MAC standards, obviously not in that elite tier with Miami of Ohio, but they were pretty good at times. They returned 6 starters. They certainly need their linebackers to gel. They got some new faces there. The schedule, to me, of all the teams we've discussed in G5 land so far, it perfectly breaks down into 3 columns. You got the wins: Fordham, Old Dominion, Kent State all at home. I also think they get Western at home. The coin flips: at Akron, Northern Illinois at home, at Central, at Ball State. Once again, all very winnable, but I'm not going to go ahead and chalk those up right away. And then the clear losses: at Toledo, I'm not sure that they are going to be able to have that in the battle of I-75, Penn State, A&M, and versus Miami of Ohio, but they do get them at home. So I'm pretty bullish on this team, to be honest. I like what they have offensively if all the key contributors, if the big 3 of Bazelak, Fannin Jr., and Stewart stay healthy the whole way, I think they get over this 6.5. And I am interested. I'm going to shop around. If I can get just a little bit extra value, let's call it 7-1 on them to win the MAC, I'm going to throw some money on them as well. This is one of the teams I'm interested in now that I'm moving away from Miami of Ohio. Let me start with you, Stuck. What are your thoughts on Bowling Green? The last caveat I'll throw in here: don't love the coach, never have. That's really the only thing holding me back from being all in on the orange this year for Bowling Green.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Leffler, and I'm also not a huge Bazelak guy. If it's going to be any time, it's now. But I mean, even they don't. Do they fully trust him? He splits some time. By the way, him and Orth were both recovering from injuries. They didn't play in the spring, and then you had this kid Anderson, this redshirt freshman who ran the spring game, and then there was I saw a question out there and a hint that could they use 3 quarterbacks? I'm like, really? Is this what we're doing? But yeah, I mean, look, on one hand, Bowling Green finished very strong last year. They finished 5-1 in MAC play with a 1-point loss to Toledo in a game you arguably should have won, and then they, fared okay in the bowl game against Minnesota. Will benefit from those bowl practices. But there were 5 wins, right? They finished 5-1 in MAC play to finish 7-5 on the season. They beat Ball State by 3, Buffalo, Akron, Kent State, and Western Michigan. Those are the 5 worst teams in the MAC, combined 14-46. So those were their last 5 wins, plus 8 turnovers in that game. It is an aggressive defense that looks to create havoc. Can they, they've been pretty fortunate in that department, taking the ball away, plus 9 turnover margin last year. Can they maintain that? But a lot of returning production comes back on offense. There are some good pieces to like on this defense. I think that when you're looking at the MAC as a whole, we'll get to Toledo, but Toledo lost a ton. No interest in them at the top of the board. We just talked about Miami of Ohio. No interest in them at their price point. And I think the 3 teams that logically make sense that I have power rated all pretty similarly are, in the same ballpark, are Bowling Green, Western Michigan, Northern Illinois. There's been some market movement. There probably will still be some more. So obviously make sure you shop around as always, especially in the futures market. Just don't give up free potential money. So yeah, I think during the discussion, I project 6.7 wins, so over 6.5 plus money. Don't mind at all. They're definitely in the conversation as far as MAC contenders, looking to win it for the first time in 9 years.
Yeah, I'm with you, Calabrese. This is who I had written down as my pick to win the conference in my future. There are 7-1s out there, which I like. Yeah, I'm not over the moon with Basilak. This is a guy who this is his sixth season starting after three in the SEC, one in the Big Ten, and his big issue was just the turnovers. And you saw he was able to cut down the turnovers last season, 12 touchdowns, just 7 interceptions, but he threw just one interception over the last 6 games. They really came early on. You mentioned Camden North got time. He's also back, so that does provide depth, something that the MAC always needs. I'm not sure when the last time a MAC quarterback started 12 games. You mentioned Stewart and Fannin are both back. Those are huge. 4 of their 5 starting offensive linemen. They do lose their top 2 receivers, but they bring in transfers from Kent State and Auburn to fill those holes. So I'm not super worried about that. And yeah, the defense was 12th in the country in pass defense last year. They returned 6 starters, including cornerback Jordan Oladokun, safety Darius Lorfills. So those are 2 really key pieces back on the defense. The entire defensive line is back. Demetrius Hardeman is back at linebacker after he missed most of the season with an injury. And Bazelak himself was playing through an injury for most of the year. So we saw him kind of get into a different zone halfway through the season. Yes, the competition wasn't great, but they finished 5-1 they had a 1-point loss to Toledo. They were right there in that game. And yeah, this is a guy with 40 college starts under his belt. So I'm just kind of bullish on this team. I like the upside here compared to, we'll talk about the other teams and some of who their quarterbacks are. I agree with Stock where it's kind of between those 3. And I kind of just think Bazelak's the best quarterback of the bunch. Last season was their highest scoring season for Bowling Green since 2015. So I like what they bring back. They started the year at Fordham. Yes, then they'll get fed to Penn State and A&M, but the MAC slate's pretty manageable after that. And then they head into the season finale against Miami, Ohio, which is at home. And as we've mentioned already, Brett Gabbert, I don't think has played a season finale in his career. So they're probably playing Miami, Ohio's backup quarterback. So they haven't had a repeat champion. I already said that. So if I'm looking to fade Miami, Ohio, I'm going to take Bowling Green to do it.
They also get to play Drew Aller week 2, so that should be good to build confidence for that defense. And did that go over Ryanell's head? I don't know.
No.
So there are some questions. I mean, look, we're showing a lot of love to Bowling Green. I will say I just said that cluster of teams you want to focus on: Western Michigan, Northern Illinois, Bowling Green. Bowling Green hosts both, so that could be a big topper. But the back end of the defense, look, you lose Anders, you lose Ferguson at nickel, who I loved. You lose Husky at corner. Aludicon returns; he's a stud. You do add Brown from Northern Illinois, who I like, their safety. But there's some more questions in the back end, and can they keep up that turnover generating ways? I know that's like their style, and they're going to go after the quarterback, tackles for loss, create havoc. The wide receiver definitely is a concern of mine. You mentioned the transfers that they brought in after losing their top 3 receivers. They have 12 career starts. So there's definitely some questions there. And I think Teron Keith Stewart's a stud, and Keith did a great job coming in. Losing Keith's big on he was great out of the backfield on third downs and did so much from them on just key downs, catching the ball, keeping the sticks moving. So running back depth with Stewart coming back from an injury and not having Keith there on third downs, that's definitely a concern of mine. But wide receiver, linebacker, one of the corner spots, just the back end the defense in general is something I'm worried about. And I'm not, there definitely are some special teams questions too, but I wouldn't fault anyone for taking, Bowling Green 7-1. Any of those 3 teams, if you want to make a case for, I don't hate.
The Ohio Bobcats went 10-3 last year, 6-2 in conference. They win over Georgia Southern in the Myrtle Beach Bowl. Their win total set at 6.5, 12-1 to win the MAC, 110-1 to make the college football playoff. In my opinion, last year was their shot. They won 10 games, but they finished 6-2 in the conference. As I mentioned, they lost by 10 at Northern Illinois and 14 at home against Miami of Ohio. They don't get to the title game. Now they lose, without exaggeration, everyone. -12 in the net tarp. That is dead last in the entire country. 1 starter back on each side of the ball. Spence Nowinski left to become the defensive coordinator at Memphis.
Like that hire for Memphis, by the way. I don't know if
that's a great hire for them. Yeah, that's an interesting one that we're going to come back to, because if the Memphis defense makes a jump, like, hold on to your hat. That team could be, top 15 by the end of the season. Unfortunately, and this is a crazy thing to say, you win 10 games in the MAC and then it's a year zero. I think this is a year zero situation. At Syracuse, South Alabama at home, at Kentucky early. Like, these are question marks for me. And luckily, we have the MAC expert to walk me through it, because at this point, there's just so many new faces. And yes, there's coaching continuity at the head coaching level, but with one coordinator gone, like, I don't know how to handicap this team. I will not be playing them early on because they have so many new pieces. So just help me out a bit here, Stuck. How do you start with a team breaking in 20 new starters?
For this particular, I mean, it all depends on the team, but for this particular case, you bet the under. Under 6.5 minus one. You can find under 6.5 minus 140 out there. Fine. My favorite win total in the conference. I'd be shocked if they got to 7 wins. Maybe, Ball State at home, finish the season. Maybe that's to get bowl eligible. But I wouldn't be shocked if this team finished 4-8. It's an easy schedule. So, like, there's a lot of winnable games on here. Morgan State, Akron at home, Buffalo at home, at Kent State, Eastern Michigan at home, Ball State at home, right? So, like, theoretically, you could win 6-7 games, but with everything that they're losing, where I have them power rated, they go 7-0 in those games. Hat tip to them. So yeah, they lose everything. They lose their stud quarterback, their running back, their top 6 receivers, 3 offensive linemen, promoted a new offensive coordinator in the spring. You mentioned the defensive coordinator change in the spring. Guess how many starts they have at the wide receiver and tight end position, FBS level? 2.
2.
They have 2 starts.
Yeah,
they were, just absolutely crushed by the portal. They lost 9 of their top 12 tacklers. There's not much to go in here. And then here's the thing, that they're the team I think in the offseason is going to drop the furthest and suffer the most from the new landscape of college football. And some teams are able to overcome that. I don't think Ohio is. I mean, maybe in the future. I'm talking about for this year. I don't think. You look at who they brought in. You look at who they're relying on, the talent level, like where they're bringing the guys from. There's just not a lot here. Then you have some coaching changes. It's a mess. The special teams also was horrendous last year. So, they're going to be in some coin flip games. A lot of those games that I mentioned, they'll be, small dogs or under touchdown favorite. So, yeah, I love the under on this team. I think that there's a lot of downside. There's not much upside. Like, how many more wins than 7? So, like, that's probably their ceiling to me. But yeah, like I said, 3 or 4 wins. I wouldn't be surprised. It's bleak for Ohio. I feel bad because a couple of years ago, this was a team that I thought was finally going to get that elusive MAC title, and now it might be a while. So yeah, I mean, even at linebacker, I mean, the strength of their team last year was Houston and Thompson at linebacker too. I think they were both first team All MAC. They're gone. Your secondary is depleted. You look at let's look at their defensive line. You lose everyone on the defensive line too. And by the way, you lose 2 of the guys you were going to count on in the portal after the spring on the defensive line. That hurts too. And you lost Rhodes at offensive tackle, cornerback Cox you were going to rely on. Like, these are guys that left in the spring. Like, they just were crushed in the spring. He had 6 All MAC players last year. They're all gone. Defensive line, it's like, all right, who you bringing in? It's like some FCS transfers, Nevada, North Dakota. There's just not much juice. So yeah, this is it's gonna be a long season for Ohio. But they get the ball eligibility? Sure. Eastern Michigan was an absolute circus last year. That team was so bad, and they got to a bowl, and then obviously lost by 144. So yeah, they could it's still the MAC. They could win 6 games and get to a bowl. But I don't see any upside with Ohio. Not worth even considering for a long shot. And under 6.5. Even with some juice. I love it.
Eastern making a bowl game. They made Lopez look like Patrick Mahomes, and then Lopez followed up that bowl game by going 0 for 13 in the spring game. So yes, your point is very, very well taken. Ianello,
worst team I've ever had power rated that made a bowl was Eastern Michigan last year.
What are your thoughts here, Ianello, on the Bobs?
Yeah, you guys said it all. I don't want to pile on too much. I do just want to add that you guys failed to mention that the lone starter on offense who is returning is legendary center Parker Titsworth. So shout out to
Great
Mr.
name.
Titsworth. Good to have you back in the squad. This is also the first season Ohio will not have a Rourke under center since 2016. So it's definitely a new era. Parker Navarro. Yeah, I mean, whatever. Looks solid in the one nice thing I'll say about Ohio fans who want to kill themselves right now. Ricky Hunt was awesome in that bowl game. He had 5 total touchdowns. So he should be the best player on this team. He'll be fun to watch if the offensive line can kind of not get him killed. So Ricky Hunt is kind of your Ohio Bobcat to watch. But yeah, Stuckey mentioned it. The guys they plugged in, you know, you got what? I'm looking 3 Power 5 guys. You have a receiver from Illinois and a receiver from Michigan who aren't even projected to start on this team. So who cares? A running back from Northwestern who should be the backup, if not the third string. So yeah, they didn't really bring in any pieces to fix it. They'll likely start 1-3. I really like Tim Albin, but yeah, 7 wins is a big ask.
All right, let's speed through.
Actually, I just got breaking news here. Titsworth actually just transferred, and they made another coordinator change. I'm kidding. All right,
That would be devastating. I would have cried.
All right, let's speed through another cellar dweller here in the MAC. The Kent State Golden Flashes, 1-11, 0-8 in conference last year. The win total set at 2.5. Odds to win the MAC, 120-1. College football playoff, come on, 300-1, should be 1,000-1, 10,000-1. Year 0 is over, and it was really rough. The offense never got out of neutral, 130th in scoring, just a touch over 14 points per game. Defense gave up nearly 35 per game. Kenny Burns' team went winless against FBS opponents. That's it. That's all you really need to know. They lost their MAC games by an average of 19 points per game. So, is there any reason for optimism? They did score a little bit down the stretch. I'll give them that. 27 against Akron, 19, which is 5 points higher than their scoring average against Bowling Green, 27 against Northern Illinois. Tommy Ulatowski had his moments, 4 total touchdowns against Akron, 284 yards against Bowling Green. They really couldn't run the ball at all, but they do have some starters back on the line. Will they improve? It's to be determined. Their best position group comes with their upgrades in the secondary. Xavier Coakley in from James Madison, Dallas Branch in from San Diego State. Winnables. You could argue there's 3 winnables on the schedule. You got St. Francis, PA coming in, Akron, and Ohio all at home. So
Ball State too. Ball State's winnable.
Ball State, sure. So
McCray.
Are you taking up your money for? Yeah.
McCray is why you should like this team. Their wide receiver, Krishan McCray, one of my favorite players to watch. If I were to bet, if you pulled me, if you just pulled me to the side and said, "Give me one over to bet in the MAC," it would take a lot for me to say.
Don't you say it.
Kent State over. Kent State over. I just talked about Ohio. How much of a dumpster fire I think they're going to be. They get them at home. Revenge against Akron at home for the wagon wheel game will be electric as always. I mean, at Buffalo, you're telling me that's not winnable. Ball State, we're going to talk about Ball State. Eastern Michigan, just talked about how bad they were, both at home. St. Francis at home. They get to play Drew Aller. You can't tell me that's not winnable. But the other ones are winnable. I mean, they have 4 or 5 winnable games on this schedule. You have to remember. I mean, look, could you argue they have 5? You got to remember it's still the MAC. I would argue they have 5 winnable home games: St. Francis, EMU, Ball State, Ohio, and Akron, and then at Buffalo. But I would argue that those games are winnable. Last year was a year 0 first by far for Kenny Burns. They had 5 returning starts on the offensive line. Last year they started 2 true freshmen on the offensive line, 3 freshmen in total. Got all 5 starters back. You have to expect a bump there. So I think that they're just going to be significantly better than last year. They're still going to be a horrendous team, but I think some of these other teams at the bottom of the MAC and in the middle got worse. So yeah, I think they get to 3 or 4 wins. Yeah, call me crazy, but I do like some of the additions that you mentioned in the secondary. They also have their punting is terrible, but Glass is a reliable kicker. It feels like he's been around forever.
Yeah, he
And
should be first team All MAC. And
yeah,
also, by the way, the very first week that we did the G5 deep dive, Glass was a big part of us hitting at least, I think it was like a 6 or 7 leg parlay. He missed all those field goals late against A&M where he hit both uprights. He got a do-over.
yeah.
So Glass is always in my heart. I love that kid, and I love the trajectory going from someone screwing up in a hilarious way and making me money to now being all conference. I hope the kid makes the NFL.
Yeah, like the thing that I'm a bit worried about, like depth's still a question. So like you're going to Pitt, Tennessee, and Penn State through your first four. Like, can you survive? But like the teams that I'm highest on in this conference, Miami of Ohio, Bowling Green, Western Michigan, Toledo, Northern Illinois. I think those are the clear top 5. They avoid Toledo, Northern Illinois, and then Miami of Ohio, Bowling Green, Western Michigan. Not going to beat those 3 teams anyway. They're all on the road. So I think the schedule broke right for them. Yeah, I project like 3.3. So give me the over on Kent State. You always need, every year you need a fun MAC bet.
Yeah, we always make our fun MAC bet is Akron overs.
It's Akron. It's
they're
Akron.
Never fun. So I hope this one pans out for you a lot better than the Zips did for us.
Probably comes down to the wagon wheel game against Akron.
Listen,
just don't lose to St. Francis, otherwise this bet becomes very not fun very quick.
Listen, arguing with Stuckey about the MAC is like telling Ronald McDonald how to make a cheeseburger. So I'm not going to say much here. I'm just going to say I don't agree. This offense was horrific last year. Ulatowski, I mean, he had a completion percentage below 50%. You look at, not only did they only beat Central Connecticut, Akron is the only loss that was even within single digits. So it's not even like they were knocking on the door. They were terrible. If you want to say they're going to get a little bit better, I could maybe see the argument where you take, normally you just go through and every team you're filling out their win total, you just pencil in a win for Kent State. Sure, maybe they've turned 3 or 4 games into coin flip games, winnable games, as you guys have been putting it. You need them to win all. And I think, and expecting them to go 4-1, 3-2 in their winnable games, I don't see it. I am not riding with Stuckey on that one.
I think there's a decent chance that the AD of Kent State just Googled, are there any Flash-based nicknames in FBS or FCS football, and then found St. Francis and was like, they're going to be our opener. We're getting this dub in the Flash Bowl in the opener. I agree with Stuck. It's a must-win. Game 1 is a must-win, particularly if you have the over. All right, let's turn to another team that lost a lot of games last year. I like them a little bit better. Buffalo. 3-9, 3-5 in conference. Their win total is 2 higher than Kent State at 4.5. 42-1 to win the MAC, 300-1 to make the college football playoff. Linguist left them in the lurch. The head coach leaves to be the co-DC at Alabama. He's the only head coach in the conference who is not returning. New head coach Pete Lembo has plenty of MAC experience. He won 19 games over a 2-year stretch at Ball State back in the day. He also coached at Lehigh here in Pennsylvania. He's had his moments as a head coach. He certainly isn't somebody who's coming in who's going to be over his head running an entire program, but he came in late in the process. He'll be working with a new QB, running back, and wide receiver room. Offensive line is in good shape with 4 returning starters. Offensive coordinator Dave Padnaud likes to identify a bell cow back in his previous stops at Temple, Coastal, and Georgia Tech, so keep that in mind. One name to keep an eye on out of spring ball, Nick McMillan, big spring game at wide receiver. So I like him a lot. Now to the good stuff, in my opinion. The defense could be really good. Sean Dolak putting his name in the portal, then pulling it back out and deciding to come back is huge. He's a tackling machine. 2 years ago, before he got hurt, he was, I believe, the either leader or second leader in the MAC in terms of overall tackles. CJ Bazile is a great edge rusher. Marcus Fuqua, a former third-team All-American, returns at safety. Let's get into the schedule a little bit. We're looking at 4.5. What are we looking at? Winnables. Lafayette, UMass, Western, Kent, all at home, plus Akron on the road. Upsets at UConn, at Ohio, Ball State at home, at Eastern. That seems to me like a lot of opportunities. You're never drawing dead with this schedule to be able to put together 2 or 3 wins at a time, an upset or 2. I think that they're going to get over this number. I think they'll flirt with bowl eligibility because the defense can be really good. Was I influenced a touch by their recent video from their social team where they recreated the entire opening scene from Major League, and he had all the guys coming in, one guy on a motorcycle, Dolak coming in with his golf clubs. I loved it. I think they at least understand who they are. They need to rebuild. They need to have some fun with it. I think they are much better than what they were last year at 3-9. This defense, I think, could be top 4 in the MAC. And if you're a top 4 defense in your conference, a G5 conference, particularly one that plays as many grimy, low-scoring, sloppy weather games in November, I like having a good defense. We'll see if they can get this done. I'm going to take a shot here on the win total, go over 4.5. I'll throw it to you first, INLO. What are your thoughts on the Bulls potentially having 2 stars at 2 different levels of their defense?
Well, first of all, I'm trying to figure out what list you're going off of for this order, because normally you go like top to bottom, and I'm like,
This is all over the place.
I keep having to flip through my notes. I'm like, how the hell did we get to Kent State already? Yeah, I think,
baby. That's what Kent State on the rise. Got to hit them early.
It's not all that complicated. It's the old East-West divisions, because I can't let them go in my heart. But yes, that's the way we're going, as opposed to leaving 3 or 4 dregs to talk about all at once.
Yeah, you mentioned the loss to Lindquist, and I know hiring a special teams coordinator gets Stuckey all hot and bothered, so I'm sure he's itching to talk about that. But CJ Ogbonna, he's more of a run-first quarterback, so there's kind of unknowns with that. He had 3 rushing scores last year. Running backs are gone. Their top leading receiver back had 13 catches last year. I know you said he balled out in the spring game, but it's still pretty inexperienced offense. They do have 4 offensive linemen back, so I think they'll rely heavy on the run game. The defense, it was weird where they were 21st against the pass last year. You mentioned bringing back Fuqua but they were 112th against the run, so that was bad. Obviously, Dolak back, I don't even know if I always know what the transport like. He transferred to Utah State. Like, did he go there? Was he on campus? And I never know how.
I think it's a Michael Scott situation where just yelling, "I declare bankruptcy," just because you say I'm going to this place. Everybody reports it like it's real news, but like, you got to be in the provost's office. You got to get your classes. You have to get the financial aid or whatever. There's some signature required for you to fully be at that school. So him going out and coming back in, I think, is the biggest offseason story for Buffalo, because he can really help a run defense that couldn't stop anybody.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was like the Simpsons gif where he had one practice and then changed his mind. But they do lose Devin Grant, who transferred to Syracuse. That was a big loss. Yeah, I just don't really know what to expect. Lembo has a bunch of coaching experience, but I'll be honest, I think this offense might be really bad. So to your point, you do need the defense to be really good. The schedule is manageable. So to your point, if they are decent and the defense is good and Ogbonna works in this system, they could win 5-6 games. But I definitely think there's a chance there's also a chance they're the worst team in the conference. Like, I think the floor of this team
worse than Kent State, baby.
Down there. I think the floor of this team is low. So I think you need a lot to go right, and I think there's a chance it goes very badly. So I'm staying away.
Yeah, I can't get there on the over. I mean, 4.5. You can find a 4.5 heavy juice to the over. Maybe could see that. I project like 5.25. Who's the quarterback? I was reading something about Jack Shields from Old Dominion. They were like, yeah, he led the Monarchs because he has the only FBS starting experience on the roster. He led. I don't know if Ogbonna actually started the game. I don't think he ever did, but he can't throw the ball. He can't throw the ball. He just snaps it and runs power quarterback sweep, or power quarterback dive. And who are they throwing to? The wide receiver room. It's bleak. But I read somewhere it was someone like Jack Shields who led Old Dominion to a big win over Texas A&M Commerce. They won that game 10-9. Like, can we slow the roll on the Jack Shields? It might be the guy. I want to see Gunnar Gray just for his name win the job. I think I don't know who's good. I think it's going to be Ogbonna to start. I don't know. They might, right? But this is going to be like by what looks like maybe a service academy offense. So I mean, Limbo, he's been in the MAC before. He went 33-29 in 5 years at Ball State, so he knows how to just take like a middling team and get to like a bowl, which is what you're looking here for. But they're 120th in experience, outside the top 100 in returning production. They lost a lot. I mean, the defensive line too, I'm worried about. So yeah, the schedule's just a joke. I mean, they're non-con. They get UMass, UConn, and Lafayette. And then you also have Akron and Kent State on your schedule. Not that Kent State's a free win this year. So a lot of coin flips. I do like the Lembo hire. I wasn't a linguist guy, and who would have known that linguist would fall victim to the dominoes that fell after Saban retired, because he got poached by DeBoer to coach the secondaries, which I think he's better suited for. But yeah, I like the Lembo hire. He'll, I think, have them more organized, and he knows special teams. Buffalo's special teams have been disastrous, and I just said there's going to be a lot of coin flips. Like, don't be disastrous on kickoffs, on coverage units, and all that. So maybe he can steal a win or two just from special teams, because over their last 8 games, or definitely their last 6, I have them all within a touchdown spread. A couple that are just, true coin flip. So there's going to be a lot of close games here. They're going to try to ugly it up and make these games shorter. So special teams, Lembo fixing their special teams and making sure they're buttoned up there. We've seen Eastern Michigan win games in this conference with less talented teams under Chris Creighton, who just we don't get penalized. Our special teams are always good. We don't turn the ball over, and we're just buttoned up. So if he can do that, then yeah, I like this bet. So it will be over or nothing for me, but it's just tough for me to put my money behind this team with the quarterback and wide receiver situation. And it's the only team in the conference dealing with the coaching change. But it could be for the better.
We close out this little mini run of teams with very low win totals. The Akron Zips, 2-10 last year, 1-7 in MAC play. Their win total identical to Kent State at 2.5. Will likely come down to that matchup against Kent State. The MAC, 65-1 to win if you're feeling crazy, 300-1. Like I said, do not bet any of these markets. They like cap them for some reason. Like it's just so lazy. For some reason, it makes me quite angry. But these should all be like 3,000-1 to make it. We're still trying to win games with Joe Mo here at Akron. Hasn't been going well. The defense gave up 28 per game last year, but was surprisingly good in terms of yardage allowed. They finished 32nd in total defense and 22nd against the pass. Tim DeBesser he's proven to be a pretty good DC, and he's back with most of his front 7 returning. So it's the same question, which is, can anything work at quarterback? But let's focus more on the defense for a second. The secondary is the issue, with 4 starters needing to return in their back 5. Damon David, a former blue chip recruit from Oregon, comes in at safety. Darian Lewis returns in the slot at corner. This offense, I tried so hard in the last 2 years to watch these games, to finally will them over the top with these incredibly low win totals. We have to go back and check the tape. I think it was 1.5, 2 for the win totals. They lost 3 overtime games last year at Indiana, 29-27. Score at Buffalo, 13-10. Eastern, 30-27. So they got a new quarterback in, Ben Finley, a former NC State Cal QB, comes in. Alex Adams returns at wide receiver. But the line, once again, work in progress. Not great for a Joe Mo offense to not have continuity up front. If we want to get into it, I don't, because I do not want to go on this ride again this year. But Colgate at Ohio, Eastern at home, Buffalo at home, at Kent. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games they, I guess, potentially could win. So I'll go to you first, Ianello. Are you doing Joe Mo one more year? The Penn State love shining through, or is your heart just broken into 1,000 pieces with those 3 overtime losses last year?
Yeah, we've now reached the Ianello Glazes former Penn State assistant portion of the podcast, which we do at every show. I'm with you. I'm less enthusiastic as I have been in the past. I'm doing it one more year. Akron got Joe Mo to stick around after NFL teams were sniffing around looking for an offensive assistant, and they got him to stay. And they've had bad injury luck the last few years. DJ Irons got hurt last year. They bring in Ben Finley to give him some stability at quarterback. We've mentioned at the top of the show how these teams are having trouble bringing down the Power 5 talent. Somehow Akron seems to be able to do it. And I'm not saying any of these guys are necessarily good, but, they bring in Jordan Simmons from Michigan State at running back. You mentioned Alex Adams back. He's a former LSU transfer. He was hurt all last year, but he was all conference in 22. So he is really talented. The defense got much better as the season went on. They actually finished 21st in the country in passing success on defense. Yes, I know they don't play any good quarterbacks, but they're not going to again. And they bring back nearly all their best players on defense. CJ Noonley on the defensive line, Antavius Fish and Brian McCoy return at linebacker. You mentioned Lewis at corner and David coming in from Oregon. He's a former 4-star recruit. I'm concerned about the offensive tackles, and I'm concerned about the lack of game-changing weapons on offense, really outside of Adams. But, kind of what I was saying about Kent State, where they didn't look close last year. You mentioned it as almost a negative, which I kind of see your point, but they lost 5 games last year by 1 score or less. So to me, they're not that far off from taking a step forward. And yeah, the non-con's brutal. Ohio State, Rutgers, South Carolina, but Colgate, Kent State, Eastern Michigan, Buffalo, all at home. They're probably favored in, 4 or 5 games. So to me, like, you need Kent State to win 3 or 4 games as coin flip, probably underdogs. Akron should be favored in like 4 games. So then you get a 1 or 2 coin flip. I'm going to do it one more time. Call it Penn State bias. I think this team's more talented than their results have been, and I'd still like Joe Moorhead as a coach. So I'm going to go over for 3.5. I'm going to do it one more time with my guy Joe Mo.
As someone who always watches these games, Stuck, like, was their defense smoke and mirrors? Was it just crappy quarterback play, or did you see some real quality and some high-end coaching that got them into the top 30, top 25 in some of these defensive metrics?
Yeah, I think there's some of their past defense metrics were a little overinflated for who they play, but I actually like their run D, and they now have like adequate size in the front 7. So I think the run D is, for a MAC team, is legit and is going to be legit again. You did lose Thomas, but you mentioned McCoy, Fish. They bring 3 back on the defensive line. I like some of the pieces that they added, and they just finally have size now. So the question is, this defense could be sneaky underrated if the transfers hit in the secondary. So big if, but that's the question on the defense to me, is the secondary. But you look at the schedule, like, who scares you throwing the ball? Like, let's throw out their known losses at Ohio State, Rutgers, and South Carolina. They play Colgate, Ohio, Bowling Green, Western Michigan, Eastern Michigan, Buffalo, Northern Illinois, Kent State, Toledo. Like, stop me when there's a quarterback there that you were afraid of. There's not. So they might be able to get away with it. You said the win total is 2.5. I thought I thought it was
3.5.
3.5. I think that's the right number, but it's over or nothing. I'm telling you, the MAC this year, these middle teams have come down a bunch. So I am worried. I'm still worried about the offensive line. That's the one piece that they haven't been able to figure out. And then, presumably, if you're going with Finley, who's ahead of Bullock right now, he's not a mobile guy. So it's going to be ugly on any passing downs if you can't protect him. So that's what I would worry about. Yeah, it's over or nothing with Akron, but I think 3.5 is close to right. But if you can get plus money, why not? Have some fun.
All right, we've gone through some of the bottom teams. It's time for a bit of a treat. Let's go back to at least the way that the conference used to be laid out in the West. Let's look at Toledo. They win 11 games last year, go 11-3, 8-0. They lose to Wyoming in the Arizona Bowl. Their win total this year set at 8.5, plus 320 to win the MAC, 30-1 to make the college football playoff. You're not going to believe it, but Jason Candle blew it with an opportunity to perhaps leap over Liberty at the 11th hour by winning the MAC title game, at least giving the committee something to think about. They go ahead and lose that game. They also lost a game to Illinois, blowing a 12-point second half lead. So, I mean, where is the fall off here? Because the entire offensive line is gone. DeQuan Finn is gone. Penny Boone is gone. Tucker Gleason has experience. He's thrown for over 1,000 career yards and 12 touchdowns. He can run a little bit, but he's going to have to be a bigger part of this offense probably than Finn was because of what they lost at running back and on the O-line. The defense obviously loses Quinyon Mitchell and all-MAC corner Chris McDonald. They're still going to be good. Many publications have 6 Rockets on first or second team all-MAC defense. And when you look at the trajectory of basically this defensive turnaround, in 2019, they were horrific. They were 121st in defensive S&P plus ranking. Then in 2021, they hire Vince Karras from Mount Union. He was a head coach there, won national titles. He was one of those rising stars. They were able to get him. And what does he do? Immediately, they bump up into the top 80, 2022, 67th. And then last year, they were 32nd in S&P plus ranking on the defensive side of the ball. First two games are cake early and could include an upset of a rebuilding Mississippi State on the road. Crazier things have happened. At Western Kentucky is tricky. They host Miami on October 5th and Bowling Green on October 26th. So let's start here. You've been critical many times of Candle, Stuckey. Last year, clearly, was the team. They had so much more talent than everybody else they played in the conference. They had competent quarterback play. They had an NFL first-round pick at corner and another all-MAC corner on the other side. They should have gotten it done. That should have been a historic season for the Rockets. Do you see a big old letdown headed up around the bend? Because this win total would indicate yes.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's the MAC. They're still gonna be one of the more talented teams. They're always recruiting well. They're the elite recruiters in the MAC, so they're getting like the most talent year in and year out. But they lost a ton, and last year was the year they had to win it last year, especially with Gabbard hurt, and they didn't. But they've been in what 3 of the last 7 MAC championships. That's off the top of my head. Don't quote me on that. But look who they lost. I mean, you mentioned Finn and Boone. They lose everything on the offensive line. I mean, they have 0 returning FBS starts on the offensive line. That is my biggest question. Stewart takes over at running back. He's a good returner. We'll see if he can handle the load. I like their receivers. That's the strength of their pass catchers are the strength of the offense. But Gleason, at least does have some experience. Still a little erratic for me. We'll see if, with him having the job and a full off season of work, he can take that next step. But a brand new offensive line, it's going to be tough. And the defense, like the interior, they're big in the interior, so that's going to help them against the run. I like their safeties; they're still fine there, but everything else they have to replace. I mean, there's a defense. It's a MAC team that lost 4 to the NFL, including 1 in the first round at corner, and you lose your other stud corner. And this is a defense similar to Miami of Ohio in that they're going to run 4-2-5, sometimes 3-2-6, and they don't blitz a lot. It's not a lot of bells and whistles, but everyone last year very well schooled on the back end. Everyone's always in the right place. You also have more flexibility with where everyone is when you have 2 dominant corners. Like, will that defense take a step back? I think yes. This is a team that's outside the top 120 in returning production, so they lose a lot. Guy like Perkins, who transferred from Florida, he's going to be really important. He left like after week 1 last year on the Gators. He's got to hit a corner, I think, for them. Depth back there is also shaky. So, yeah, I mean, it is a pretty easy schedule. Duquesne and UMass to start. That helps you kind of hit the ground running with all of this change and figure some things out. You do host Ohio. You host Miami, Ohio. You host Bowling Green. And then you go to Northern Illinois. Speaking of the other top 4 of the other 4 of the 5 top teams in the MAC, your league road games: Buffalo, aforementioned NIU, EMU, and Akron. It's pretty easy. So the schedule worked right for them in a year where there's a lot of change on the roster. So yeah, I project 8. What do I project? 7.95. So yeah, 8.5 is heavily juiced to the under. So I'm close to market. The under or nothing, but it's like I think that I have them power rated as the second best team in the MAC, but the gap between them and then the second tier of teams of Bowling Green, Northern Illinois, and Western Michigan, it's not as big as it's been. That gap is much smaller than it was last year. So no interest in them from a future perspective. I still think BG, NIU, WMU, that's where you got to look.
Yeah, you're paying a big premium for the name brands. I mean, the fact of the matter is they're half the price of a Bowling Green at 7-1. Did that surprise you, Ionello, or is that just in line with, basically moving away from betting someone with such short odds to win this conference?
Yeah, it did surprise me, actually. I think you said you're paying for the brand and the name, and not only did they lost so many players, but they lost 7 first-team All-MAC players. Like, these weren't just these were dominant, elite, top of the conference type pieces. Gleason and Stewart, we've seen plenty, so I'm not super worried about those two. The offensive line is a massive question. It's like you mentioned the receivers, Jerwan Newton, Junior Vandeross, they bring back tight end Anthony Torres. They're going to have the best receiving room in the conference, so that's at least one big positive. It's just a matter of the offensive line holding up and how does Gleason do with a full season of work. And the defense has been nasty, so they do have decent pieces. Safety Max and Hook is back. Darius Alexander up front. But I don't think we can emphasize enough how big a loss Quinyon Mitchell is for this defense because he basically, it was the Sauce Gardner, old Darrell Revis treatment where he took away half the field for opponents. They were, got to the point last year where they were not even throwing it to his side of the field. So having someone that good who could just eliminate an entire half of the field is such a big loss. So
and you couldn't even pick on their other corner though at all either. Like
Yeah.
it was couldn't do anything throwing against them.
Yeah, so I think it's just, they're not gonna be able to live up to what they've done the last 2 years. We mentioned, none of us are big fans of Kendall, and now he doesn't have as much talent. And I think Stuckey said it perfectly with the power rating thing is, yeah, they're still probably the second, best team in the conference. But the way I at least do these win totals is I go through the schedule and I literally write it in a spreadsheet. If a team I think will be kind of, more than like a touchdown favorite, I kind of go, okay, win, more than a touchdown dog, loss, and then within its score either way, coin flip, and I typically want to, give them half the coin flips. When you did this last year with Toledo, every team playing Toledo, you just go loss, where now they're coin flips. Now Bowling Green's a coin flip. Now Northern Illinois a coin flip. Those were wins for Toledo last year. Just I wrote them down as wins. So you have these games going now coin flips, and with a win total of 8.5, you still have to win all those coin flip games. And I don't know that they have the horses to do it like they used to. So it's a pass for me. They should be good still, but I think they take a step back and they come back to the pack. So like you said, I'm not paying that 320. They should be in that 6-1 range with the rest of them.
I think this inflates the value on the next team we're going to talk about because you can get them at close to 8-1 to win the MAC. That's the Northern Illinois Huskies, 7-6 last year, 5-3 in conference. A win over a surging Arkansas State team in the Camellia Bowl, 80-1 to make the college football playoff. They got 4 starters back on this offensive line, which is their bread and butter. Ontario Brown is in line for a big season. Trayvon Rudolph can help either Ethan Hampton or my pick. If he can win this job, I think he'll have a bigger impact on their offense. Arkansas Pine Bluff transfer Jalen Chance Macon at quarterback. I want Macon for 2 reasons. He can run. We saw it in the spring. And he's huge. He's 6'5", 230 pounds. If you're going to replace a quarterback like Rocky Lombardi that you were able to rely on in so many big, close games, big moments, I would love a huge guy that you can run basically like a little wildcat with. You can certainly run QB sneaks. He could be interesting if he wins the job. That's going to go into fall camp. They won 6 of their last 8 because the defense took over against lousy teams, as well as holding Arkansas State, who was an offense that was putting it together to just 19 points in that bowl game. That's a great sign. 3 DBs are back from the 6th-ranked pass defense in America. This is a potentially elite secondary. And the schedule, so just for starters, I'm going to throw some money here on them to win the conference. I think they're priced in a way at 8-1 plus 750 would be my floor that interests me. But then when you look at their win total, let's talk wins. Western Illinois, Buffalo, UMass, Akron. We'll call Central a win at home as well. They get all those at home. Toss-ups at Bowling Green, at Ball State, at Western, and then the clear losses at Notre Dame, at NC State, at Miami of Ohio, home against Toledo. I think the schedule breaks in a really nice way for them at home where you can start stacking wins. So I'm also confident in over on this win total. I just think that this roster matches the scheme, the kind of football they want to play. The defense is going to be good, really good on the back end. And this running game should be able to physically overpower teams. I love Brown. I think he could have the kind of offensive player of the year kind of season here in the MAC. What do you think about this, Stuck?
Yeah, I think that the defense might be a tad overrated. I hear a lot of people talking about the secondary, which I do like, but here the quarterbacks they faced last year, they played Boston College, they faced Moorhead. They played SIU, FCS team. They played Harburg with Nebraska, who put up 35. Your boy Cardell Williams, I know, put up 22 on them. Finn put up 35 with Toledo. Then they played Akron when Bullock started. EMU, Smith, abhorrent, like absolutely abhorrent quarterback play. They played Bauer at Central Michigan, who put up 37 on them. Keal Kelly, who's moved to defense now in Ball State. They played Western Michigan's backup. They played Kent State's backup. But they played a ton of backups in horrendous passing offenses last year. I will say though that the offense made a coordinator change after week 4, and they went from averaging 16 points per game over the first 4 games to 29 over the last 9, almost double. Still 24 points per game, even if you remove the games against Akron and Kent State. So I like some of the changes they made schematically on offense. And they finished the year 6-3 with 3 one-possession losses after that offensive scheme change. And they're going to play a lot of bad passing offenses again this year. Notre Dame and NC State are the exceptions. They're not winning those games anyway on the road. The others, Western Illinois, Buffalo, UMass, Bowling Green, Toledo, Ball State, Western Michigan, Akron, Miami, Ohio, Central Michigan. Yes, I'm listing these out, so our producer has a conniption. You're facing a lot of poor passing offenses again. And I just said it. I'm curious to watch the quarterback battle. But this, Ionella said he liked Bowling Green. Don't hate that. I'm waiting on my future, but I think whoever 8-1, if it's out there, like if Northern Illinois is 8-1, these other teams are 7-1. Like they're all in the same bunch. I'm probably going to take NIU depending on how the quarterback battle plays out. So this is one of my 3 teams that's in the mix for sure. And they have 5 really easy home games, which is the floor. I project 6.65. So pretty close to the win total, but they're in the mix for a future. Very, very senior laden team, similar to Bowling Green. Bowling Green, ton of seniors. But they're top 25-ish in the country in overall experience for the 2nd year in a row. They also have the best depth they've had in a while. So, this is a team that definitely has the potential to win the MAC.
Yeah, Northern Illinois, they finally lose Rocky Lombardi to the 55 and over community. I was hoping he'd be back for one more year. And the quarterback battle will be interesting to watch because Ethan Hampton has seen pretty decent time over the last 3 years. He's played 10 games, started 3. Hasn't looked great, but he's definitely the experienced guy. 9 touchdowns, 8 picks. The interesting thing about Jalen Macon coming in is they also brought in his top receiver from Arkansas Pine Bluff. So if Macon does win the job, having that continuity will be nice. Offensive line has all seen playing time, should be a good unit. I'm not as down on the defense as Stuckey. They bring back 8 starters. I think they have a chance to be really good.
No, I didn't say I'm really down on them. I just think there might be a tad overrated in the back end just because of who they faced last year. But my point is they're probably going to face a lot of the same poor offenses.
Yeah, exactly.
Passing offenses.
Yeah. Rasheem Thomas, Roy Williams, Devontae O'Malley make up what should be an excellent defensive line. Secondary, I think, should be pretty good again. Javon Bird at corner, who should be all conference this year. They have 2 really good safeties. Their entire special teams unit's back, which I know Stuckey loves. So they have a deep wide receiver room. I think if Hampton or Macon hit and can be the guy, they should be decent favorites in like 5 games, and then probably 3 sure losses. So you need them to basically go 2-2 in their 4 coin flip games against Bowling Green, Western Michigan, Central Michigan, and Toledo. So my only issue, and I was toying between the same 3 as Stuckey, and I'm sure Calabrese as well. What kind of led me away from Northern Illinois and to Bowling Green is just I feel like over the last how many years has Hammock been the coach? This is 4th. I feel like this team just does dumb shit. Like they're super inconsistent. They play up and down. You kind of don't know what you're getting. I mean, look at last year's perfect example. They start the season beating Boston College on the road and then lose to Southern Illinois the following week. Like they kind of consistently do that where they lose to bad teams or screw around with bad teams. They'll pick off a good team. Who they beat 2 years ago? They beat 21. They upset a Power 5 team as well, didn't they? Minnesota, was it? They beat Minnesota, right? In 21? I don't know. They beat someone in 21 and then they lost to like a horrible team the week after. So they kind of do that. So they're inconsistently just I have trouble trusting this team. So I like them overall. I don't hate your pick, Breeze, but that's just kind of what made me go Bowling Green instead of them.
At Georgia Tech in the opener in 2021, they beat them by 1 point. That was the season they got to 9 wins. Yeah, I agree. I think there's some variance. I think quarterback play is going to matter quite a bit. I think it will be interesting to see who they end up going with. There's a little bit of starting experience with Hampton, but I would rather roll the dice on somebody new to see if that gives them higher upside. Now, when we look at the directional schools in Michigan, it breaks down for win total 6.5, 5.5, 4.5. Let's start at the top of that. Western Michigan 4-8 last year, 3-5 in conference, win total at 6.5, plus 650 to win the MAC, 130 to 1 to make the college football playoff. All right. Their schedule early on, can they survive it? At Wisconsin, at Ohio State, at Marshall. The Marshall part obviously being far less daunting. Then they get a huge break of avoiding both Miami of Ohio and Toledo, a pair of teams that beat them by 31 points in total last year. Overall, they're top 40 in returning production, which, as we beat the drum over and over again in G5 land, very rare. But Hayden Wolf is back at quarterback, and he does not move the needle for me, Mr. Wolfpack. He's a C-plus starter after posting just 2 starts with QBRs over 55 last year. But he's a game manager, and they have the rest of the pieces for that to be okay. Because 1,000-yard rusher Jalen Buckley is back. 4 starters on the offensive line. They were one of 4 G5 offensive lines in the entire country to be top 35 in both run and pass block grade by Pro Football Focus. And then when you get into the defensive line could be a real strength if Louisville transfer Popeye Williams is a big pass rushing threat. 2 back at linebacker, 2 back at corner off a serviceable defense. And when you get into Scott Power, their DC, he does a great job with both pass defense and forcing turnovers. In 2022 at La Tech, his defense forced 22 turnovers in 12 games. That was top 25 in the country. Western also, when you pair it with the way that Western plays football, they do a really good job of protecting the football. They were top 20 in giveaways. So if you are more disruptive and you take chances and you take the ball away, that's going to basically sum up to a healthy turnover margin. And that's one of the quickest direct lines to winning more games, being plus in the turnover margin. Like I said, if they survive, they come out healthy against Wisconsin and Ohio State early. I like them to be feisty down the stretch. This could be a team that goes from 1-3 to 7-5. Wouldn't shock me at all. Akron, Kent State, Bethune-Cookman, Eastern, all at home. I think that gives them a lot of cushy, easy wins to kind of pad this and to get in line to go over this win total. Stuck, you've been teasing it the whole show. Is this a team that you're bullish on to maybe make a run from the outside and challenge one of the top teams in the conference?
Yeah, I mean, but on one of our first college football preview pods, like a month, what is it today? It's early August now. Back in, I forget when we did our first one, maybe June. I teased my MAC manifesto and said Western Michigan plus 950 is who I'm targeting, but I'm afraid of Walt Bell. And I didn't go out and bet it. I wait for the MAC manifesto and for our podcast. And that little worm Colin, I think, went out and was telling people to bet it, because now it's down to plus like 650, 6-1 at a lot of places. So yeah, I like them a lot better at plus 950. I like Wolf. I think that I don't love him, but I think he's fine. I think he's the best option that they had last year by far. They also added Nixon from Oklahoma State today or the other day, a running back who was around for like 1,000 yards for them, little speedy guy to go along with Buckley and Salam. I really like their backfield. I really like their offensive line. You lose your best defensive lineman to the NFL, but I still like that group. And you have some experience at linebacker. They need to improve, but you at least have some experience there. And you have experience on the back end as well. Special teams need to be better. They've been one of the worst for the last 3 years in FBS. And at least you got a new punter and kicker. So maybe there's some upside there. Can't be any worse than they've been. And this is a team that last year, it's like they had 2 returning starters and a new coach. It was like a year 0 situation. Now they're top 25 in experience, top 15 in returning production. So yeah, I like some of the additions from the Power 4 level, and they have a lot of experience, not things that I'm used to saying. You've even heard us say on this podcast. So I have them favored in 8. I project them at right around 6.5. So I don't see a ton of value on the win total, but they're a team. They're one of the 3 that I'm looking at from a futures perspective. I hate that the price got bet down. I like the way that the schedule breaks, assuming, as you said, that they can just survive and stay healthy over those first 2. So yeah, they were definitely going to be my future at 10, close to 10-1, but price matters. So now getting down to 6-1, it's getting a little dicier. That's a big jump for a team that finished 4-8 last year. You can make these big jumps in the MAC, but they were also blown out in a lot of games. They went 0-1 in one possession games. That's all they played was one possession games, and they finished +4 turnover margin. So I like some of the things, but and again, they also have 2 new coordinators, and I'm not the biggest Walt Bell fan. That was one of the things I told Colin. I said Western Michigan, but Walt Bell. So they're under consideration. I think they're one of the 3 teams in the second tier that you should consider for a future. But prices definitely come down, making it a little less appealing.
Where do you come down on Western Iowa?
Yeah, they had a weird year last year where they started 3 different QBs throughout the year. They kept kind of rotating them. Trayson Borgett and Jack Solopick both hit the portal, so now Hayden Wolf seemingly is the guy. He probably was the best of the group. 1,000-yard rusher Jalen Buckley's back. Leading receiver Kenneth Womack. They also bring back Tony Sambucci, good old Italian boy on the outside as well. You mentioned Walt Bell. Not sure I'm sold about that, but they do have some solid transfer pieces at offense at receiver. They bring in a tight end from Florida, NC State, yeah. Some solid defensive line pieces anchored by Jacob Gideon. Stuckey said he's concerned about Walt Bell. I'm concerned about Scott Power. They lose Lou Esposito to Memphis, and they replaced him with Scott Power, who was just fired from La Tech, who had maybe the worst defense in the country. So
I'm just saying this. I liked Scott Power before when he had personnel. I'm circling that 2022 season. He's somebody who's going to roll the dice. We've talked about La Tech on this podcast. That program is poverty. That program is going to get Sonny Cumbie fired because there are no dudes in that locker room whatsoever. So I'm just throwing that out there. I'm going to have a little human shield in front of Power for this conversation.
If I had to break the tie, I would side with INL here. I'm not the biggest Scott Power. So like 2 new coordinators, and I'm not like wowed by either one. But go ahead.
He's also the third coordinator like this spring. Like Esposito got poached in like March, and then they hired someone else to replace him, who then got poached like 2 weeks later. So it was kind of a roller coaster throughout the spring. But you mentioned they bring in Popeye Williams to help replace Marshall Nealand. Corey Walker returns on the other side. You got Tate Halleck and Aaron Wolford returned in the secondary. So they were first and second in the team in tackle. So they have decent pieces. I'm less bullish on them in terms of conference future with the price coming down now, just because I don't know that I see the upside potential with Hayden Wolf, who is, to me, just a guy, and Scott Power, in my opinion, holding the defense back from reaching its full potential. But then you mentioned the schedule. I think after they lose to at Wisconsin, at Ohio State, but then their schedule is a cakewalk. They don't play Miami. They don't play Toledo. They start conference play with Ball State, Akron, Buffalo, Kent State, who are, based on odds-wise, the 4 worst teams in the MAC. So they realistically could rattle off 6 straight wins heading into November. And then you would just need one of their final 4 coin flip games to go over this win total. So I'm not as bullish on the upside of a MAC championship, but based on their schedule, I actually do like them to go over 6.5. I think Wolf provides them enough of a floor, and with the schedule, they should be favored in like 8 to 9 games. So I'll take them over 6.5.
All right. If Western's at 6.5, we move down 1 win to Central Michigan, 5-7 last year, 3-5 in the MAC. Their win total set at 5.5, 12-1 to win the conference, 300-1 to make the playoff. Fire up chips, baby. Year 6 of Jim McElwain on tap. He's won or tied for first place in the West on 2 occasions. He won 8 games in year 1 and won 9 games in year 3. And then since then, they've been MAC mid pretty much ever since. 9-15 overall, 6-11 in conference play in 2022 and 2023. But there are reasons for excitement. Bert Emanuel Jr. can be a star. Obviously, he was banged up last year. He still managed a 4-touchdown game and a thrilling win over New Hampshire. That was one of the best FCS G5 games from an entertainment standpoint last year. In 2022, he averaged 7.4 yards per carry, including an all-timer MACtion performance against Buffalo, where he ran for 293 yards and 3 scores. He gets Marion Lukes and all of his receivers back. The offensive line is green, but they do return both tackles, so we'll see what they can do in the middle of that O-line. If he isn't an effective passer, which is possible, or if he gets hurt, which is certainly possible, Joe Labus is in from Iowa, a former 3-star kid, gives them some decent depth. No offensive coordinator, though, which is interesting. This is McElwain's show. We'll see if he's calling plays the whole season, if he elevates somebody from his staff, just something to monitor. This
He
defense
just made a bunch of staff. Yeah, they just shook up their offensive staff yesterday. They've fired the offensive the quarterbacks coach. They moved all these guys. They moved some guys from assistant to I don't know. I haven't even got a chance to review it fully. Yeah, it's 4 weeks.
Basically, all I was looking for there was
they still don't have a coordinator, no offense coordinator.
Yeah, exactly. He hasn't. So I think it's just his show, Coach Mack, just doing everything. Basically, he's the cameraman. He's in the kitchen whipping it up. He's doing social promotion for the show. He's everything to the Chips this year on offense. Then we get to the defense. The defense's main problem was simple. They couldn't take the ball away at all last season. They were the third lowest in terms of takeaways in the entire country. They have decent starters back at all three levels of the defense, and they added Power 4 transfers like Notre Dame's Nolan Ziegler at linebacker. Biggest challenge, in my opinion, is their two non-con games. Michigan State and Notre Dame last year have been replaced with Illinois and San Diego State. So this is an opportunity for them to get a few more wins, to maybe come out of the non-con healthier than they did last year. If Emmanuel gives them pop on offense, this is a stretch, but I'll say there's potentially 6 or 7 winnable games here. We got Central Connecticut State at FIU, Ball State at home, San Diego State in year 1, new offense, Aztec Fast, all that great stuff. We'll see what they look like. Ohio at home, at Eastern, and versus Western Michigan late in the season. 5 of those 7 are at home. So I think this number is just about right. They're a team I'm more intrigued to see what the offense looks like with no OC and a quarterback who gets banged up. If he doesn't, could the running game really pop? And is that enough to have an identity to be a bowl team in the MAC? Absolutely. Can they do anything more on defense? We'll see. It's going to be wait and see time for me. It's a pass purely on the win total. Not interested in them stealing a conference championship or going to the playoff or anything crazy like that. What do you think, Ianello?
Yeah, I thought they'd be much better last year, and they were 5-7, and even the 5 wins weren't convincing. They needed a game-winning field goal as time expired to beat New Hampshire, as you mentioned. They scored with 13 seconds left to beat South Alabama, scored late to beat Eastern Michigan by 3, beat Akron by 7, beat Northern Illinois by 6, despite being outgained. They didn't have a single good win where you're like, they looked good. Obviously, you mentioned
5-7 record, 5-1 in one possession games.
Yeah, and, obviously Burt Emanuel is an electric factory, and when he's healthy, he's awesome. He played just 6 games last year, was only really healthy for 2 of them. He got hurt against New Hampshire in the second game of the year and then tried to gut it out and just couldn't do it. You mentioned, I think it's a big loss that they lose Jace Bauer over to Sam Houston, who Colin thinks is going to the playoff. So obviously, not having that backup. And then, they bring in Joey Labus from Iowa. Okay. Iowa was playing a defensive tackle at quarterback instead of this kid. So they were down to clearly they didn't want to put him on the field. So if he's worse than that guy, I'm certainly not banking on him. You mentioned Marion Lukes is back, which obviously is big. Their top 3 leading receivers are back. They do bring back 2 offensive tackles, but the whole interior of the line will be new, which is concerning given Emmanuel's health. And then you said it, just the defense can't force turnovers. They're so bad at it. Dante Kent is back. He's the best player in this defense, but the defense really, really, really needs to be better. And to me, this is such a hard team to bet because I think they have the highest range of outcomes in the conference because if Burt Emanuel plays like he did against Buffalo, he's Lamar Jackson and they can win the MAC. If he gets hurt again, they could lose every game. So I also think the schedules did not do them any favors. They don't play Kent State. They don't play Akron. They don't play Buffalo. They end the year with the projected 5 best teams in the conference all in a row. So, and again, is Emmanuel playing in those games? So they just have such a wide range of outcomes that to me, they're so hard to bet. I think if I had to, I'd lean under, but I don't want to. But they're just a team I'm excited to watch Burt Emanuel when he's on the field.
Stuck, what do you think?
Yeah, I project 5.3. So actually, numerically, I would lean under. They have the hardest schedule in the MAC. The only team to face the projected top 6. Non-con is manageable to start at least, so that's nice. But yeah, I mean, if they had a reliable quarterback that you could count on, there's some potential with the offense. They have a lot of size on the offensive line. They actually might move their left tackle to left guard, which would mean that there's a left tackle question. But your top 4 receivers are back. Your top 2 backs. You have a big offensive line. The problem is Emmanuel just can't throw it. That was the upside that I considered last year, but he's just not a consistent enough thrower. So you can just load the box against them, and you can turn their offense into mush. They did have a ton of injuries last year, but again, they went 5-1 in one possession games, despite 3 of 11 on field goals beyond 30 yards, which is definitely a question. So yeah, you get no Akron, Kent, or Buffalo, and you have to face the top 6. You don't get the bottom 3. That's tough. So yeah, with his staff shakeups on offense, that's not a good sign. So reading some of the tea leaves, not great. Not sure how much longer is Mac going to want to do this in Mount
I mean, if
Pleasant.
anything, it sounds like he just wants more jobs. He's just picking up more jobs within the athletic department, just putting new titles on his door. The one thing I'll say about Emmanuel real quick is I agree. I mean, watching him pass, it's not just purely his mechanics. It's everything in the passing game. But he did have that injury to his throwing shoulder. So I would love to know, we're not going to get clarity on this. Is he 100%? What was the problem last year? And is he going to come out of fall camp a renewed, refreshed passer? Because if he can be even a little bit better just to keep teams honest, I agree. That's a huge ripple effect to benefiting their run game, but we just don't know at this point.
I might go. I might take a road trip out to Mount Pleasant and watch him. So I don't know, because if he can throw it, that's the upside team. That's the only team that I would consider that has semi longer odds to win the MAC, and outside of the top 5 that I've been mentioning. And because you have the big offensive line, you have your skill positions back. If you can get consistent quarterback play, you've dealt with a lot of injuries last year. You haven't been. Can you get some turnover luck? They've only forced 10 and 8 turnovers the last 2 years. So yeah, there's some upside with this team if the quarterback hits. I'm just not there yet right now.
All right,
the schedule doesn't do him any favors.
Yeah, I think, well, this will be a team that I think we'll discuss throughout the year on the G5 podcast, because we're going to learn a lot very early on about this offense and if it has any punch. And if it does, I'm going to stick to my guns. I think they're going to be feisty, but the schedule is going to be very difficult. So not a lot of outright wins, but certainly catching points. Go ahead, I know.
Here's a bet I'll make. Bert Emanuel will be a G5 Hero of the Week at some point this year.
I like that. All right, in the Conference USA preview, we all aligned, all 3 co-hosts on and under, hoping we can do the same thing here. Eastern Michigan, 6-7 last year, 4-4 in conference. They lose to South Alabama in the 68 Ventures Bowl. They get waxed. Win totals at 4.5, 31-1 to win the MAC, 300-1 to make the playoff. Cole Snyder in a quarterback. Just one returning starter on the offensive line. This whole roster decimated. -12 in the net tarp, thanks to Colin for putting that together. Tied for dead last nationally. And let's look even closer at last year. Not just the bowl game that was embarrassing. 6 wins, right? Howard by 10. UMass by 2. They beat Kent State. They beat Akron in double overtime. And they lose the bowl game, as I mentioned. They get waxed by 49 points. I am out on these guys. No Samson Evans at running back to make it work. The back 7 of their defense has far too many new faces. At Washington, Jacksonville State early. The wins, St. Francis. I guess St. Francis is just really interested in becoming a MAC member. They'll go ahead and play the Red Flashes. Give them a win there. At Kent, winnable, sure. At Akron, winnable, sure. That's it. I am going under on them. This is my favorite under in the conference. I am out on them, which is rare.
Kent, that's because at Kent's a loss, baby.
Yes,
Kent over.
I like
Akron.
I like Chris Creighton a lot. He's turned water into wine many times over in Ypsilanti. Not an easy place to win. Plenty of respect. This is not the roster. This is a year 0 roster. Good thing he's built up all this goodwill with the administration. He can go 2-10. No one's going to blink. He'll be back next year. We can talk about him next year in a positive light. Cole Snyder, not the guy to come in and save this offense. They needed a savior in the portal to be able to put the whole offense on their back. They should have swung for the fences with a JUCO kid, with an FCS kid moving up trying to make a name for himself. They did not. I am out on EMU. Stuck, are you with me on this?
Yeah, it's under or nothing. They were
all right, there we go.
Bad. They were so bad last year. I got to do my St. Francis was decent last year. Like they were, I got to do my. I haven't done any FCS work yet outside of just like, all right, I got to find out what range this team is for.
St. Francis's athletic department was so strong they scared the other St. Francis in New York just out of college basketball altogether. So yeah, maybe St. Francis is more of a power than I thought.
Now I got to dig into them. But yeah, I'm not a Cole Snyder guy. I used to take Buffalo unders when he was there. So now, granted, the offense and quarterback play last year was detestable. I mean, it was beyond offensive. So it can't get much worse, but this team doesn't have much. I have questions about quarterback, running back, wide receiver, offensive line, their defensive line, linebacker. I like their secondary. I like this kid White, who's I think they're going to move him from nickel to corner. He was an absolute stud last year as a true freshman. Some of the numbers that he allowed, yards per completion, yards per route run, I mean, they were absolutely elite on a national level. He's going to move to cornerback. I like some of their safeties and some of their additions there. So I think the secondary could be decent. I mean, I'm reaching here. The only thing I will say is that they did have really bad injury luck, specifically on defense last year, which really hurt them. And the O is being rebuilt. Like, they are close to bottom 15. They're definitely bottom 20 returning production outside the top 100 in offense and defense. The offense is rebuilding, but the offense what was the offense last year? It was horrendous. So how much worse can it be? The run D's got to get better. The run D is so bad, and you can just run all over them. That's probably part of the secondary numbers, is you could just run all over them whenever you wanted. They're undersized up front. I don't think Snyder's the answer at quarterback. The only thing I will say, though, is that, if I look at the schedule, this is one of the 10 easiest schedules in the country. They have 3 winnable non-con games, which, you're taking an under 4.5 with a MAC team, and they have 3 winnable non-con games. Like, part of me just wants to bet UMass in week 1 against them, which I might do. And so, like, they face... Who do they face? Kent, Akron, Buffalo. So they face the bottom 3. It's a very nice road slate. And then I mentioned Creighton before, is that they're not going to beat themselves with penalties. Their special teams are going to be solid. They're going to be buttoned up. So, like, they can steal a couple games. So that's the only thing that concerns me, is, like, they won't beat themselves, and they'll probably steal a couple bullshit games, like just what Creighton does. They're well coached, like, just from a disciplined special teams perspective. But yeah, I mean, I can't believe this team made a bowl last year. They were so bad, and they have a lot of work to do. I don't hate your under.
Ianello, can we make it a clean sweep, please?
No, I can't. You guys have said 3 times throughout this show that Chris Creighton dragged the dog shit team to a bowl. That's just what he does. Look, I have nothing.
I'm not. And by the way, I'm not betting the under, so we can't make this a consensus.
I'm not betting the over for sure. But
yeah,
I'm not betting an under on a Chris Creighton team, because we've mentioned it the whole show. Yes, they suck. They don't have a quarterback. Cole Snyder's ass. Their quarterback last year was ass. They don't have any, like, I have nothing positive written about them. And, like,
you could bet under Chris Creighton on when his win total is like 6.5.
Yeah, they play. We've said it. They play Kent State, Akron, Ohio, Buffalo, UMass, St. Francis. That is 6 winnable games, and I blindly trust Chris Creighton to win winnable games. It's what he does. It's what he's always done. He showed it last year with a bad team. I'm not betting him to do it, but I'm certainly not going to bet him against him. Maybe Max Crosby, he donated $1 million to redo the stadium. Maybe he should have thrown a few bones to get a quarterback instead of, keep the track and just get a quarterback. But no, I'm not fading Chris Creighton. You're out of your mind. This team stinks, but he's going to find a way to win 5 games, because that's what he's always done.
Yeah, he doesn't have Samson Evans anymore. Look at the box scores for the games that they won. They win against UMass by 2. He's got 89 yards. He's the whole offense. They beat Akron in double overtime. He has 3 touchdowns. The dude's not there anymore. They have nothing.
No one's stopping you. No one's stopping you. No one's stopping you.
They got JB Smoove Mitchell.
All right. Fair enough. Well, let's close this out.
I didn't say they were going to be good. I'm saying Creighton could win games with you and me playing quarterback and running back. I'm not.
Okay, you believe that it doesn't matter what roster.
For example, I kind of like UMass. What is this line sitting at? I kind of like UMass week 1, and I'm looking at. Let me see what this updated line is. So I'm looking at that game, projecting it, doing some matchup based stuff, and I then think to myself. So EMU's flipped. There was a pick. I think they might have been +1. They're -1 now. UMass's special teams this year are horrendous. They are undisciplined. They're not well coached. And, like, the kickoffs alone, like the kickoff coverage alone, could lose them that game. That petrifies me. So, like, that game could be flipped just based on special teams performance against UMass. So like those are the games that just scare me on the MU. But I digress.
We'll close out with the Ball State Cardinals, 4-8 last year, 3-5 in conference play. Win total set at 4.5, 37-1 to win the MAC, 300-1 to make the college football playoff. One starter back from a defense that finished 14th against the run, 17th in total yards. That kept the roof from caving in on them. Their DC, Tyler Stockton, did an amazing job. He is now a co-DC at Boise. It's one of the reasons I'm so high on the Broncos this year, to take a big step forward defensively. Kevin Lynch also out as offensive coordinator. Mike New will have a new quarterback, likely freshman Caden Simanza. He played a little bit last year. Looked pretty good, especially against Kentucky, but that was with better weapons at tight end and receiver that are no longer there. New faces across the board in terms of skill positions, and there's 3 new starters on the offensive line. They play both Miamis, the Ohio and Florida versions, at James Madison, at Vandy. They do avoid Toledo. When you look at the wins here, with the win total of 4.5, Missouri State, and then a lot of their winnable games, they're on the road, at Kent, at Buffalo, at Ohio. You can't slip up there if you want to go over this number, because then they're going to need to win some games that are likely they're going to be an underdog in, so you need some outright upsets. I lean under here. I used up all my MAC under passion for Eastern Michigan, so I'm going to basically pass on an under here, but I do not love what this team brings back offensively, and the heartbeat of it was their defense that I trust. They lose personnel. They lose the mastermind behind it, a multiple Broyles nominee in Stockton, their DC. So, Ianello, what are your thoughts on Ball State?
Well, first, I just want to give a shout out to Stucky. I know you mentioned the all-powerful MAC manifesto, both the preseason and the midseason. I remember Stucky writing in his midseason MAC manifesto last year, calling Ball State a bye team in the midseason when they switched to Kyle Kelly at quarterback. Well, they finished the season losing by a touchdown in Toledo, beating Central Michigan, losing to Bowling Green by 3 on a missed game-tying field goal, beating Northern Illinois, smoking Kent State, and then losing to Miami, Ohio on a blocked game-winning field goal. So they did really turn it around at the end of the year.
Covering machines. I was betting them every week.
They covered those. Yeah, they covered all those games. I bet them every single Tuesday night. They covered like 6 straight games to end the year. Now, Kelly went in the portal. Then he decided to return to Ball State, but now he's listed as a cornerback, which I'm not sure why. He's also going to be their primary kick returner. They said they're going to have packages for him on offense. Don't be surprised if he starts a game this year, because he was pretty good when he came in. You mentioned Simanza. He started 3 games last year before being benched for Kelly. So now you have the guy that he was benched for is on the roster. That I don't know how that's going to work. But he was also rotating with like 4 other quarterbacks during the spring. So who really knows who's going to end up winning that job? Tanner Koisiel decided to return at tight end. So that's a huge get back. They do lose Marquez Cooper, but this team, they pretty much run the ball. That's all they really did was run the ball. So the defense was good. But they returned just 1 starter. So that is a concern. I have a bunch of questions about this front 7. So I'm with you. I have no idea who the quarterback is. They have no explosiveness. I have a ton of questions about the defense. So it is a pass for me. But I just wanted to kind of give Stucky a shout out for getting me all those Ball State covers. Read his MAC manifesto. It is the holy grail.
Yeah, but they can't do with that. The reason I was buying them is that, I like the defense. They got some guys back from injury. Kelly taking over means that they were just going to run the ball, lean on that defense, and that's what they did. And Kelly couldn't really throw it. I think he had more rushing yards than passing yards last year, but they would just grind games down to a halt, rely on that defense, which I really like. They can't do that now because their defense is going to be bad. They lose everybody. They lose their good DC. They might be starting like a couple D2 guys on the defensive line. Defense, if not dead last, they're one of 3 or 4 teams in returning dead last and close to the bottom on returning production on defense. They want to go to a more pass-heavy offense. I'm not sure a guy like Simone's is the answer there. So yeah, it's rough. There's not much to like here. New play caller on offense, not a quarterback I love. Yeah, I like the tight end, but everywhere else in the roster, there's not much to really like here. Their special teams last year were also horrendous. I don't see that really changing. Their coverage units were so bad, and their return units as well, for that matter. So from a schedule perspective, tough non-con, at JMU, at Miami. And I hate that the way, they do have some winnable road games. Like at Buffalo, at Kent State, which helps a bit, and they host Bowling Green, Northern Illinois, Miami, and they avoid Toledo. Those are good things, but I hate the way that their schedule sets up. They don't get Akron, and then they have 3 straight road games after Missouri State, 2 late buys with all of this change. So don't like that. I project right around 4.5, but yeah, it could get ugly. If I had to bet, it would probably be under, but I'm actually at 4.4, so really right on market. But yeah, not a consideration. Well, if they had the same defense, Kelly came back, they played the same way, they would definitely be on my long shot consideration. But defense decimated. No thanks on Ball State. I will thank Ball State though. They did win a MAC title for me in the manifesto, one of my futures years ago. So Mike New will always have a special place in my heart, but might be the last year for him if this goes south.
Couple points to make before we get out of here. Number one, just in terms of your overall opinion on the MAC, don't make the mistake that most people do, which is in September, they get their head caved in, they play all these paycheck games, they lose by 100 points, care about how they play in defeat and if they're healthy, and just do not get over-influenced by those non-conference games in September, because to Ianello and Stuck's point, these teams can really turn a corner when they start to get back to the way they want to play football against opponents with similar talent. So that's step one. Second part, Ianello, we did it. All the G5 conferences are now previewed. We put that all together. So if you are listening out there in the audience or you're watching us on YouTube, thank you so much for going on the journey with us. We're going to be back before you know it with a week 0 action. We got some G5 teams in action there. Bronco Mendenhall making his debut. Hawaii trying to cover a monster spread against Delaware State. Can't wait to deliver that for you guys. All right, before we end here, let's go around rapid fire conference title matchup. Who do you have winning it? Stuck, you can go first.
This is very subject to change because I still have work to do. Got to see quarterback battles, depth. But as of right now, the longest odds are on NIU. And I think that you want to take, from a futures just value perspective, you want to take either NIU, you want to focus on that second tier, NIU, Bowling Green, Western Michigan. Longest odds right now are NIU. Subject to change, but I'll go NIU over Miami of Ohio.
Ianello, what you got?
I'm going to live in that tier. I'm going to go with Bowling Green beating Miami, Ohio, and their backup quarterback.
I think this is the year of the step back for the top teams. I know we're living in the year of chalk. It's just chalk, chalk, chalk across all of sports, but I'm going to go Bowling Green beating NIU in the title game. Divisionless football here in the MAC for the first time, seeing what that matchup looks like. For Stuckey and Mike Ianello, I'm Mike Calabrese. This has been the Big Bets on Campus podcast, the Group of 5 Deep Dive presented by BetMGM. Thank you so much for listening. If you're listening and not watching, go over to YouTube, subscribe to our BBOC channel. If you can't find it, go into the episode description. There is a link there. Or if you'd like to search the old-fashioned way, BBOC Sports Betting into the YouTube search bar. You're going to be able to see our beautiful faces. Go ahead, click, subscribe, comment. Can't wait to engage with you throughout this entire season. Not only are we going to have all the episodes you've come to know and love, we're going to have new content from college stars. We're going to have video game simulations from College Football 25. We're going to have special one-offs throughout the season. We got content for Conference USA and midweek Maction as well. No stone left unturned here at BBOC. Tell a friend, tell an enemy. Thanks so much for listening, and be sure to check out Colin and Stuck as they walk you through everything that is happening in the Power Four with all their conference previews.